I'm in the school infirmary, my fingers gripping the edge of the table as I try to gather my thoughts. It's hard to believe that in just a few hours, I'll be in court, about to dismantle everything I've built over the past 8 years with Renato. I try to stay focused, but my mind wanders, returning to the arguments, the broken promises, and the immense weight of everything I've lost. The truth is, I'm exhausted. I wonder when I lost control of my own life. So, do you want to take a break? The sharp voice of the principal, Sylvia, snaps me out of my stupor. She watches me from behind the table, her forced smile tinged with slight irritation. Sylvia always has a sarcastic comment, a hint of disapproval disguised in her words. She's used to being in control, and any deviation from the routine makes her uncomfortable. Yes, I have to be in court by 11. It's a divorce case, I reply, my voice almost fading. My heart tightens, and I feel a painful spasm in my throat, but I keep my gaze steady. She sighs, as if my personal problems are an inconvenience to her busy schedule. You've always been strong, Luisa. Your son, Diego, he's in school, isn't he? Good boy. It's a shame things have come to this. She pauses, stroking the huge ring on her finger with a cold gaze. But as always, it's personal life that gets in the way of work, isn't it? I hold back the lump of frustration in my throat, but I just nod. Thank you, Sylvia. I just need a little time. She nods, but with an air of someone who has given in a lot, as if she's doing me a huge favor. Well, you can go, but don't forget the reports. The health committee team will be visiting us soon, and you know how things work around here. As I leave the office, I take a deep breath, trying to remember why I still care. This job was everything to me for years, but now it's also a reminder of everything that's been lost. I left the office with hurried steps, my heart racing, my hands sweating, as I quickly glanced at the clock. 10:30. I had to be at the courthouse by 11, and every minute was precious. I headed towards the bus stop, trying to contain my growing anxiety. It was then that I saw a fallen man in the middle of the sidewalk. He was lying on his side, motionless, and everyone around him seemed to be oblivious. My instincts as a nurse kicked in. I didn't think twice. I ran to him, knelt down, and started checking his vital signs. The strong smell of alcohol and dirt didn't go unnoticed, but something on his face made me certain that he needed help. "Sir, can you hear me?" I called as I looked for his pulse. His heart was beating, but his breathing was labored and irregular. I tried to wake him, but he remained unconscious. I felt despair rising within me. Grabbing my cell phone with one hand, I called 911. Each second seems like an eternity as I explain the situation to the attendant and wait for help to arrive. Some people around me start to notice, but no one seems willing to help. At this point, I have lost track of time. Finally, the ambulance arrives. The paramedics quickly get out, take over the care, and thank me for helping. I feel relieved, but the relief is followed by a growing dread. I look at the clock again and feel the ground disappear beneath my feet. 10:55. With my heart pounding and my mind in chaos, I run towards the bus stop. I know I am late, catastrophically, and irremediably late. I rush to the courthouse, my heart still racing from the emergency a few minutes ago. I feel the weight of every look as I enter the room, as if every person there knows exactly what is happening to me. I take a deep breath and walk to the table where my lawyer, Ricardo, is waiting for me with an expression of dismay. When I look to the side, I see Renato already seated with a rigid posture, his face impassive. Beside him, Julia, the woman he brought into our home, wears a smug smile, clearly taking advantage of the situation. I feel a wave of anger and frustration overcome me, but I force myself to remain calm. I just need to believe that justice will be served. The judge adjusts his glasses and gives me a cold look. He nods to Renato's lawyer, who stands up and begins to talk about my absence, insinuating that I don't have enough responsibility or interest in my own case. I try to justify myself, to explain what happened, but each word sounds like an excuse and is lost in the tense silence of the room. I feel Renato's gaze on me, a mixture of contempt and barely disguised satisfaction. Considering the facts and the plaintiff's absence at the beginning of the hearing, the judge begins with a stern tone. The court grants custody of Diego to his father, Renato Sousa. The division of assets will be reviewed in favor of the defendant, given the history of absence and lack of commitment shown today. My mind goes. It takes me a few seconds to process the words. It's as if the air has been knocked out of my lungs. I've lost Diego. I've lost the house we built. I've lost everything I thought was safe. Renato looks at me with that same cold smile, the triumphant look of someone who knows they've come out on top. I feel tears threatening to come, but I force myself to stay strong. I won't give him the pleasure of seeing my weakness. As the judge closes the hearing, I feel something inside me break. I'm not the same anymore. I leave the room, my mind blank, only the dull, deep pain of emptiness. Going back to work after losing Diego in court felt like a kind of torture. The school, which used to be a refuge, now seemed as cold as the decision that took away my right to be with my son. Each step I take through the hallways feels heavier than the last, and yet, it's all I have left. As soon as I enter the infirmary, I'm surprised by Francisca, the history teacher, who offers me a hot coffee without saying a word. Her eyes, full of compassion, say everything she could possibly say to me. I thank her with a discreet nod, taking a sip, as I feel her hand lightly touch my shoulder. These small gestures of support are like a temporary balm, but they can't ease the emptiness inside me. Children come and go throughout the day with their stomach aches and bruises from playing, and for a brief moment, I manage to forget the weight I carry. Their laughter, their curious looks, and even their tantrums remind me of Diego. During a break, I see Joao, the janitor, who greets me with a smirk and a sympathetic wave, as if to say he's there for whatever I need. These small gestures are my anchor now. I'm about to end the day when the director, Sylvia, enters the ward with an impassive expression. I sigh lightly, preparing myself for whatever charge she has in store for me. "Luisa, a man came here earlier today. He said you saved his brother yesterday," she says bluntly. "He left a card and asked you to get in touch." "Who is he?" I ask, still dazed from emotional exhaustion. "Benjamin Vasconcelos. He said he wanted to thank you personally." I look at the card in my hands, trying to understand what it means. I stand there, holding the piece of paper, while Sylvia leaves, leaving me alone, with yet another twist I didn't expect. Maybe, just maybe, this is the beginning of something new. Something that somehow fills the void and reminds me that, even after such a great loss, I can still have something to fight for. Finally, I muster the courage to call the number on the card Sylvia had left on my desk. I still feel a knot in my stomach, a feeling of nervousness mixed with curiosity. When the call is answered, the voice on the other end is calm and firm. "Hello? Luisa, this is Benjamin Vasconcelos." "Yes, it's me." My voice comes out low, but I manage to compose myself. "I wanted to thank you for the card and for the call." He laughs softly, which reassures me a little. "Actually, it's me who should be thanking you, Luisa. You saved my brother Pedro's life. I don't think you have any idea how much that means to me." "Oh, I was just doing my job. He looked like he needed help, so I try to downplay it. But deep down, I'm touched by the sincerity in his voice. It wasn't just his job. It wasn't just anyone who stopped to help a man lying on the street." He pauses, and his voice softens. "I'd really like to meet you in person. If you don't mind, I wanted to thank you properly. Maybe have a coffee." It would be a pleasure for me. There's something in the way he speaks, something genuine, that makes me hesitate less than I expected. I'm so used to seeing hidden intentions in the people around me that it's almost strange to meet someone who seems so sincere. Besides, maybe I also need that little bit of lightness, something good, in the midst of everything I've been through. Okay, I think a coffee would be a good idea, I say, trying to hide my nervousness. We arrange to meet at a cafe in the city center the next day. When I arrive, I see Benjamin waiting at the door. A tall, elegant-looking man with a friendly smile that immediately dispels the tension. He greets me with a simplicity that makes the meeting easier. And soon we are seated, each with a cup of coffee in our hands. You know, Pedro has always been stubborn. He has a heart problem, but he doesn't think he needs help. He went out there as part of an exercise for a play. Can you believe it? Benjamin says, with a slight smile of disbelief. I can't help but smile, imagining the scene. He is brave, but maybe he needs to listen to his own body more. Yes, and that's why he was so lucky to have crossed paths with someone like you, he says, with an intense look that makes me wonder, makes me look away, embarrassed. We talk about life, about work, and about trivial things that make me, for a moment, forget the weight of the court, the divorce, and even Diego's absence. Benjamin listens to every word as if it were important, and this gives me a strange feeling of lightness. As the conversation flows, I realize that this meeting is more than just a thank you. It is a breather in the midst of the chaos that my life has become. As we say goodbye, he surprises me by asking, "Can we see each other again?" I feel a sudden heat in my cheeks, but I manage to nod, feeling that maybe, just maybe, I am ready to let someone back into my life. Meetings with Benjamin have become a refuge, a break from the whirlwind of my life. He has always been kind and attentive, and for a while I allowed myself to believe that, despite everything, something good was emerging. But little by little, I began to notice little things that didn't make sense, details that seemed out of place, inconsistencies in the stories he was telling. Then, one afternoon, when I least expected it, the truth finally came out. I was in a cafe waiting for him when I saw a man who looked very much like Benjamin come in. He looked at me and waved, but there was something strange in his expression, an uneasiness I had never seen before. When he got closer, I realized that, despite being almost identical, something in his posture and gaze made me doubtful. Without thinking twice, I called him by name. "Pedro, isn't it?" My voice was low but firm, and the man in front of me stood still, his expression betrayed by a moment of surprise. He sighed and ran his hand through his hair, visibly disconcerted. "Luisa, I'm so sorry. I didn't want you to find out like this." My mind was spinning, trying to assimilate what was happening. "So, have you guys been switching places all this time? Why? For what?" It was Benjamin's idea. He thought that if I went through real situations, I would interact more and overcome my shyness. I don't even know why I agreed to this ridiculous idea. Pedro looked embarrassed, and for the first time I saw a more human side to him, something beyond the facade. "You both lied to me, Pedro." My voice cracked, indignation and disappointment mixed together. "What if you had continued with this? What would have happened?" He fell silent, unable to look me in the eyes. "I know it feels like a betrayal, Luisa, but in the midst of all this, I started to really like you. I thought maybe I had a chance." He took a deep breath. "But I understand that you feel betrayed. I just wanted you to understand that this wasn't a joke to me. I feel a mix of anger and sadness. I was starting to trust, to open up again, and now this. I don't know what you expected me to do, Pedro. I'm trying to rebuild my life, and now you show up, wanting me to understand that lies can have good intentions." My voice was thick with hurt. "I need some time to think about all this." He nodded, looking even more uncomfortable. I understand, and I respect whatever you decide. I left the cafe without looking back, with a heavy heart and the feeling that what little I had rebuilt was once again in ruins. The encounters with Benjamin became for me a rare point of comfort and happiness. I was beginning to feel something genuine growing between us, a connection that seemed sincere. But small details began to intrigue me. Stories that subtly changed, comments about moments we had already lived, but that he seemed not to remember well. I didn't want to think the worst, but something didn't fit. The confirmation came one late afternoon, when suddenly I ran into Benjamin, or at least I thought it was him, leaving a cafe with a friend. When he saw me, he became visibly uncomfortable, and the man next to him gave a slight wave and went on his way. I waited until we were alone and asked, "Benjamin, I need to ask you something. Have you been avoiding me lately? Or is it just me?" He looked at me for a moment, in silence, before finally answering, "Louisa, actually there is something I need to confess." His expression transformed into something I had never seen before: regret. My heart raced. Before I could ask, he continued, "It wasn't always me when you thought you were with me. When we first met, it was my brother, Pedro. We switched identities. At first it was to help you overcome your shyness, and then it seemed easier to keep up the charade. It was a mistake, but now you know." I stood still, shock and disappointment paralyzing me. "So instead of trusting me, instead of simply being honest, you decided to play with my trust, like I was a pawn in a game." My voice was shaky, hurt, written in every word. He reached out, but I recoiled. "Louisa, I know this seems unforgivable. It was a mistake, but in the midst of it, I really fell in love. This wasn't planned." I tried to hold back the tears, but I couldn't. I felt like an old wound had been reopened, like every step I had taken to rebuild my life was falling apart. "I trusted you, Benjamin. I was learning to trust again, to allow myself to be vulnerable. And you did that. How do you think I can believe anything you say now?" I asked, feeling the weight of pain and disappointment. He didn't answer, just lowered his head, seeming to finally realize the depth of what he had done. "I need time, Benjamin. And honestly, I don't know if I'll ever be able to forgive this." I left there with my heart in pieces, the feeling of betrayal following me with every step. The following weeks were a mix of silence and introspection. I had asked for time to get away from everything, especially Benjamin. The lie still throbbed inside me, but the truth is that he hadn't given up on me. He tried in many ways to show that he was sorry, that his initial intention had gotten out of hand, but that his feelings for me were genuine. Then, one day, I received an unexpected call. It was Benjamin. He had important news about my custody case for Diego. With some reluctance, I agreed to meet him, anxious and at the same time apprehensive to understand what he had to say. At the cafe, he was there, waiting for me, with that serene look that always disconcerted me. Before I could say anything, he began to speak. "Louisa, I know I made a mistake, and that you have every right to not want anything to do with me anymore. But I want to at least be able to help you with what matters most now: your son." I managed to contact an attorney who specializes in appeals, someone who believes that we can reopen your case and review this unfair decision. I felt a mixture of surprise and relief. I knew how complicated the situation was, and hearing those words gave me a hope that I had buried. I still felt the pain of betrayal, but it was undeniable that Benjamin was willing to fight by my side. "And why are you doing this, Benjamin?" I asked, my voice barely audible, fearing the answer. He took a deep breath and looked me straight in the eyes. Because I love you, Louisa. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but at least I can try to help fix a part of your life that I may have complicated even more." With those words, something in me gave in. It was hard to accept, but it was also hard to ignore the genuine effort he was making. In the days that followed, we worked together with the lawyer, gathering documents, testimonies, everything that could prove that Diego should be by my side. We spent hours reviewing details, meeting at school, at the lawyer's office, wherever it was necessary to move forward with the case. Every moment with Benjamin reminded me that, despite everything, he was there for me, for Diego, without asking for anything in return. The appeal hearing was scheduled, and he stayed by my side until the last minute, holding my hand when I was shaking, encouraging me when fear paralyzed me. When we finally entered the courtroom, I felt a sense of relief and renewed strength with him by my side. At the end of the proceedings, the judge announced that Diego's custody would be reviewed. That moment was a triumph, not just for me, but for all of us. As we left the courtroom, exhausted, Benjamin looked at me and said, "Louisa, I just want you to be happy. And even if that means being away from you, I'm here, willing to respect whatever decision you make." In that moment, I realized that maybe, just maybe, his love was real. And maybe it was something worth fighting for too. When the judge announced the final decision, I felt like a huge weight had been lifted from my shoulders. Diego was coming home. My heart raced, and a joy I could barely contain began to take hold of me. Years of struggle, despair, and sleepless nights, all of it finally dissipated in that moment. I looked to the side, at Benjamin, who smiled with a mixture of relief and pride. He had been my rock, my silent courage. We left the courthouse, and Diego was waiting for me outside, his arms open wide, and a smile that lit up his face. I ran to him and hugged him as tightly as I could, feeling his small hands wrap around my neck. I whispered to him, promising that nothing would ever tear us apart again. Finally, my family was complete. As for Renato, he was in the courtroom, watching everything with a bitter, empty expression. He was no longer the confident man I had known years ago. I learned that he had lost everything. His lover, Julia, had betrayed him, leaving him with debts and the public shame he had so long avoided. Renato now faced the same kind of loneliness and abandonment that he had so long avoided. For a while, I endured. As we left the courthouse, I saw Renato alone, without the victorious smile of before. There was no more mocking laughter, no more contempt, just silence. And for the first time I felt nothing, neither anger nor revenge, nor satisfaction. He had reaped what he had sown, and now I could move on without any resentment. When we finally returned home, Benjamin was there by our side, supporting us every step of the way. That night, as Diego slept next to me, I held his little hand and felt a peace I had not known for a long time. I had fought for this moment, and now it was real. My life was finally starting over, but now with the certainty that I had what mattered most, my son, and the chance for a new beginning. My wedding day came faster than I imagined. I woke up with a feeling of lightness, a peace that I hadn't felt for a long time. I was surrounded by the people who truly mattered to me, and most of all, by my son. Diego was beside me, excited, holding my hand with the same enthusiasm I had seen in his eyes since I learned that we would now be together forever. At the ceremony, Benjamin looked at me with a smile that conveyed everything we had been through together, every hardship, every victory. With his calm and firm manner, he extended his hand to me, and I felt that I was finally exactly where I was supposed to be. There were no more secrets or reservations between us, just the desire to build something real. When the judge announced that we were husband and wife, Diego ran to us and hugged us, almost making me lose my balance with his excitement. I held him tightly, as if I wanted to engrave that moment in my memory forever. The joy of having him there, of knowing that our family was finally complete, was more than I could have asked for. Benjamin held my hand, and I felt that we were ready to face anything together. After the ceremony, we had a small reception, simple, but full of smiles and happy voices. Diego played with the other children, while Benjamin and I watched hand in hand the small party around us. For the first time in years, I was not in a hurry, nor was I afraid. I was just happy and calm. Later, when we returned home, I felt an indescribable warmth as I walked in and knew that this was the home we would build together. Diego ran into the bedrooms, happy and tired, while Benjamin and I sat side by side on the couch. He looked at me with that same smile that had won me over from the beginning, and I knew that I could finally rest. Life had taken us on unexpected paths, but now I was here, surrounded by the love and peace that I had always sought. With Diego and Benjamin by my side, I felt that no matter what came, our family was finally complete. And most of all, I was at peace.